I don't see. Now they hear me. Now it looks like they hear me. Hold on a second. When this thing goes on, that means they hear me. Good. All right. As we said, there's a bit of a technical. We had some technical issues here. We're getting better at this. We are going to start once again. This is a daily Talmud class. Although, as I always tell my students, that very often we discuss everything in the world except for the Talmud that we're meant to be learning. But we will usually by accident, we end up covering some of it as well, right? So we will do that as well. We have a very interesting Talmud class today coming up where we're going to discuss Rav Yosef, okay? What's Yosef in English? Joseph. I don't know how the J, how come they had the J? The J is used to be a Y sound. In the old, I'm not sure which language, but definitely in German, a J is a Y. I think in some other languages it is as well, right? That's why we ask why we're called Jews. Why we call Jews? Why we call Jews? Okay, that's a good question. We're Jewish. Why we call Jews?
Because white people.
Huh? Why we call Jews?
Because they made it up.
They just made it up. Where does Jew come from? Where the Israelites? How does Israel turn into Jew?
That's what I'm saying. Judea.
So you say we make it up?
No. Some random person made it up, but it's really we're Judeans.
Oh, so we're Judeans. The reason why we're Judeans because if you look throughout history, there was a king that he basically conquered. There was actually two governments in ancient Israel at certain times. There were times that they were united, but most of the time in ancient Israel, there was two separate governments. There was the state of Israel, and there was actually the state of Judah. Okay, so there was a state of Israel, a state of Judah, and and the state of Israel was taken over completely, and only the state of Judah remained. All right, so that's why we call Jews from the word Judah, because we're from the Judean kingdom. Right? Good. Excellent. Now, where are we holding over here? Oh, the Gemara. Now, yesterday we began with something very important. What did we begin with? We begin with Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef tried to make an opinion. Now, what would be the difference if Rav Yosef made the opinion or if he only tried to make the opinion? Right?
It would be an argument if he made the opinion, but if he tried to make the opinion, then he's saying...
So he's saying, if he would have made the opinion, then we can say you're wrong. And if he didn't make the opinion, then he only tried to make the opinion. So he's not wrong because he tried to make the opinion? He's also wrong. So what the Gemara came to say, hey, we found that the rabbi was wrong. That was the whole thing the Gemara came to tell you, was that the rabbi said they was wrong?
No.
Huh? So then why is the Gemara bringing it? Why is the Gemara bringing Rav Yosef? Okay? Why is the Gemara bringing Rav Yosef if it's just there to tell you that he's wrong? Is that nice? Huh? Why would the Gemara bring a rabbi just to prove that he's wrong? Are we trying to insult him? Why are we doing this?
There's an underlying reason, or there's an underlying nuance that he's detecting.
Oh, I wouldn't say there was an underlying nuance. The very fact that he attempted to say something, even though he was wrong, showed that there was some true reality behind his reasoning. Okay, it's very important to realize when we read the Talmud, we're assuming that every single rabbi that is quoted by name in the Talmud was a super genius and he knew everything. And he got nothing wrong whatsoever. Everything was precise, and every once in a while we can really kind of like throw at him something and they're like, oh, okay, I surprised. Right? And for example, yesterday Abaye brought a brisa, which perhaps Rav Yosef didn't know, right? Now, as I've said in the past, we usually say that every single Amoira, every single sage actually knew everything that was available. How is it that Abaye, who's a student of Rav Yosef, could bring a brisa that Rav Yosef, his teacher, didn't know? Something's wrong over here, right? Something is inconsistent with what I say very often is the rule of the Gemara, is that each sage was a genius and knew everything. How could he not know everything? By the way, I want to point out that anybody watching online, you could send a comment, and if it's a good question, we will answer it live. So if you think you have a good question or you have some suggestion that you want to speak about, please feel free to put it in the comments. I could see the comments, right? This is the comments. Next level, that's the comments. Good. Next level. Somebody told me, Mr. Dirtball told me that. Next level. How do I get a follower called Dirtball? Who calls themselves Dirtball? Dirtball? Come on, man. I've heard a lot of. I wonder who this Dirtball could be. Who's this Dirtball? By the way, don't worry. I'm not inserting any of the people out there. It's actually my student right here. He decided to put himself in as Dirtball, and I'm never heard of a name like that.
Tickling my age, right?
Bittling you, yes. Mr. Dirtball. Should we call you that in class? No. We'll say, what would you like to say, Dirtball? Anyways, those of you who don't call yourself Dirtball, you can definitely, if you send in a comment, we will see it live, and I will try to address it if it is something that I think obviously is something that worth speaking about. If not, maybe I'll speak to you about it later. But yes, definitely feel free to comment, and we will see the message, and we will try to deal with it as follows. Even if it's not live, you can still put in a message, meaning if you're seeing this after the live video, you can put in a message, and usually once or twice a day, I'll go through them and see if, try to answer any questions that come up. Yes?
Tell me to put the comments on your YouTube channel, on your video, on the YouTube channel.
Put it on the YouTube channel.
On your...
Right. Yeah, but some of them are on Facebook, some of them are on YouTube.
That's true, it's true. Those are the
Wherever you are, that's where you should put it. Don't worry about it. I'll find you somehow. That's that. Let's continue. Without further ado, we're going to Rav Yosef. How is it possible that a student can tell his rabbi that he has a piece of information that his rabbi didn't have? Doesn't the student learn from the rabbi?
Yes, for sure.
Huh? What? No? Anybody has an answer to this?
He learns, but not us.
So Rav Yosef is actually a very important character in the Talmud, that he has this concept. Rav Yosef, at one point, he got sick and he forgot everything. There's a name for this type of thing. What is it called?
Amnesia.
Amnesia? What's it? No, there's a type of it's when you get a serious illness. You lose your memory. It happens. Yeah. I don't know. Amnesia. All right, thank you. So amnesia. So he had amnesia and he couldn't remember anything from before. However, he still maintained his brilliance. So very often he would try to say something, or he would say something, and his students would correct him. Why? Because they had more information than he did, not because they got information from a different source, because everything his students learned, they learned from him. However, what happened is that very often the students remembered something that Rav Yosef didn't remember, right? So very often Abaye, who is the student of Rav Yosef, would remind him. As a matter of fact, you will find a lot in the Gemara, specifically with Rav Yosef, you will find very often that Rav Yosef argues with somebody, and Abaye says, why are you arguing with me? Why are you arguing with him? You actually agreed to somebody else. You actually told somebody else, you actually said otherwise. Meaning you agreed with that opinion somewhere else, and they're kind of like telling him what his own opinion was, right? You're like, you tell me, you imagine if you try to tell me what my opinion is. You ever try to tell me what my opinion is? You know what's going to happen if you try to do that?
Yes,
Sheesh. You're going to tell me what my opinion is? However, Rav Yosef was actually understood that he had this amnesia and he forgot what he was saying, what he said, and so therefore he was humble enough to allow his students to remind him what his own opinion was or is. Okay, so there is that concept, very important. So let's continue over here. Now, So now that we understand how Abaye overthrew Rav Yosef when he attempted to make an opinion, and by the way, very often Rabbi Yosef is a person that attempts to make an opinion. The other characters in Gemara usually don't attempt to make an opinion. They usually make an opinion. Only Rav Yosef, I wouldn't say only Rav Yosef, but usually Rav Yosef is a very common character that he tries to make an opinion. Meaning that very often when he wanted to say something, he would double check with his students and they're like, hey, does this contradict anything else that we've learned? Yeah? What's going on? Huh? We're good? Good. Excellent. What were we saying? You have a question. Yeah.
Going back, remember like a couple of us on men on the base when there was the whole thing about Rav and Rava acting the same way?
Rav and Rava were acting what? What did they do?
It's talking about
What, he tried to have an opinion?
it says there's a thing I can't remember exactly. I can see exactly who's talking, but it's saying so. It's talking about whether or not I think Rava did something. And they're like, no, of course he didn't because of the Barisa or something. And then it says, he says, no, you can't have done this because it was overthrown. Tutad or whatever.
Okay, so
like maybe.
So what you're saying, right? So we do sometimes suggest that a rabbi did not hear a particular brisa. We do say that sometimes. Rarely, but we do say that sometimes. And again, if one rabbi heard the brisa and the other rabbi didn't hear the brisa, there has to be a source of information that one rabbi had that the other ones didn't. Whereas if a rabbi was the main teacher of the person, then how is it that he has information that the other one doesn't have? Right? And, however, I want to point out the concept that it says Savar, he tried to make an opinion, right? Rav Yosef very often tries to make opinions. The reason is because he very often had to double check with his student before he made the opinion. He's like, oh, Rabbi, here's my opinion, but I have this opinion, or I want to make this opinion. Does it contradict with anything else? So very often he was actually checking with his students to ensure that his opinion didn't contradict anything that he said in the past or anything that he's taught in the past, which is very interesting. And he was humble enough to trust his students when they said that perhaps something that he said was contradicting him, right? Yeah, good. All right, any comments or questions from the viewers can definitely send a comment. If you put a comment, we will see it. And if you have a question or a comment or something that you want to share, we might actually give you a mention in the video if it's something significant. Yeah, go.
This rabbi actually had amnesia. He actually had amnesia, and so.
Again, he didn't have like this long-term disease that made him constantly forget. He one time had a disease, and that one disease caused him to forget his memory, and then he was done. Once he was done that disease, yeah. It wasn't. What's that?
There's retrograde amnesia and anterograde amnesia.
Anterograde amnesia.
Anterograde amnesia.
Anterograde
It means
amnesia.
that if your short-term memory is shot, you can't recall new things that happened after the event.
Right.
So.
Who's the other one?
Yeah, but it's.
Retrograde is you get knocked out and you forget what happened before you got knocked out.
Yeah, that's
Anterograde amnesia is you get your bell wrong and now you can't remember new stuff moving forward.
Right.
You
So.
can remember new stuff.
No, he could remember new stuff. He had kind of like this cutoff. There was this cutoff when he got sick. It somehow did something to his brain, and there was this cutoff that anything from before he didn't remember. Right? He only remembered what happened afterwards. Seemingly, his memory was fine afterwards. Okay. So we have a different name for that. That's retrograde amnesia. There we go.
But still, we don't want to.
Baruch Hashem, we have some serious scientists over here in our class, right? And my YouTube channel is called Intellectual Spirituality. So many people ask me, it sounds like an oxymoron. Isn't spirituality meant to be some feeling, fluffy stuff? Right? Isn't that what spirituality is? Wrong! Sheesh, what are you, crazy? If spirituality is only fluffy feeling stuff, that means by definition it's not true and it's not worth engaging in. It's like a drug that makes you feel good. It's not spirituality. True spirituality True spirituality is a real reality. Just like any reality has an intellectual aspect of understanding it, so too does spirituality. There's a concept of understanding spirituality in an intellectual way. Okay? And that's exactly what the Gemara is trying to do, is trying to figure out true intellectual spirituality. Yeah? Good. This is serious business. Right? If spirituality is only a figment of your imagination, then that's all it is, and it's not even worth engaging in. If spirituality is something real, you must be able to analyze it just like you're able to analyze anything else in your life. Anyways, let's continue the Gemara. So we speak about Rabbi Yosef having this retrograde amnesia, and therefore he didn't know that there was a brisa that contradicted him. And that's why Savar, he wanted to hold this. The reason he wanted to hold this is he thought that this was the truth, and he suggested it to his student, and he says, does this contradict anything? And comes up Abai and says, I'm sorry, Rav Yosef, but in fact it actually does seem to contradict something. Yeah? Good? Makes sense?
But there's an underlying logic there, right? Like he thinks that for a reason.
Correct, and that's what the Gemara is now going to analyze. The Gemara is going to analyze the very fact that we brought Rabbi Yosef and his amnesia, which seems a little embarrassing to Rabbi Yosef, that he's forgetting something, he needs his students to help him. The very fact that the Gemara brings this means that there's a legitimate reason why it brings it. I've spoken about this a lot in the past. In Western culture, we love having opinions on things that we have no connection and we're completely irrelevant to the concept. Okay, we love having opinions, so much so that if somebody disagrees with me, I have to hate his guts because he has a contradicting opinion to my personal opinion, which neither of us has any relevant reason to have that opinion to begin with. Right? I love it when somebody comes to me, they come to ask me my opinion, right? Somebody the other day, they asked me, what is your opinion on global warming? I said, I don't have an opinion. And they looked at me in shock. They're like, oh, you don't have an opinion on global warming? What's wrong with you? Right? I'm like, how's it relevant to me? What do you want me to do? Right? You say, conserve energy, waste, make waste management. I said, okay, fine. Well, that has its merits without global warming. Right? If you could somehow ensure that your resources can be reused by somebody else, then that's an awesome concept. It's very good. Okay? We don't need global warming to justify conserving things and using it in the best possible way. We don't need that. So what I told the guy, and which I tell people always, if you want me to have an opinion on something, you're going to have to tell me how it's relevant to my life and how it's going to make a difference in a decision that I will make. And this is something very important that the Talmud teaches us that. Oh, so we have somebody here asked, did Abraham gift you that book? Which book? I'm not sure which book. Which book are we talking about? Oh, the big book here. I wish I gifted it by Abraham. Abraham, if he would gift me a book, I would. I wouldn't be hanging. It would be in a museum, right? This book actually did not come from Abraham itself. This book is actually a book that was written about 1600 years ago, and it's called the Talmud, and it is the analytic book, how the Jewish people analyze what is the ultimate commands of Moses. So Moses gave us the 5 books of Moses, and what's going on? That's a good answer? Okay, so this book is not from Abraham. This book is not even from Moses. This book was written by Ravina and Rav Ashi, right? If you remember that name, Rav Ashi. Rav is master or Mister. Rav Ashi. Okay, and it is known as the one of the most brilliant books in Jewish literature because it really goes into intellectual spirituality and explains deep concepts on how we analyze the Torah. All right? Does that make sense? Good. Thank you. What is they? They, them, stereo, staker. Did I read it right? I don't know.
No, the mysterious.
Oh, the mysterious, what does it say?
Raker.
Raker, the mysterious Raker. That sounds very mysterious, Mr. Raker. Yeah. By the way, how do you guys in the class like when we invite these random people that we never met before into our classes? You like it? You bring them on? Huh? More the merrier. Please, come on. There you go. Okay, we have Dirtball coming on back. Dirtball coming in with his comments. Anyways, good. What's that? Okay. Now, as I was saying, what?
Is the difference of Talmud and Gemara?
That's a good question. The Talmud Bavli is very often called the combination of the Mishnah and the Gemara. Okay, but very often Talmud could also be referring to only the Gemara itself, but the Talmud itself. Okay? Anyways, let's continue. Where are we up to? Oh, we're trying to explain to you that the very fact that the Gemara brings Rav Yosef in this embarrassing situation where he forgets everything, why is he bringing him? Is because it's something very important is going to come out of this. And what's going to be important? What important is going to come out of this? We are going to pretend as if Rav Yosef actually said this. Then we're going to analyze what we can figure out from if Rav Yosef said this. And whatever we can figure out from if Rav Yosef said that is in fact going to be a legitimate analysis, even though we throw out his opinion for a different reason. You understand? We throw out his reasoning because it was a brisa that threw out his reasoning. Very nice. But the fact is that without that brisa, his reasoning stands, and whatever we can learn from his reasoning, we will keep and we will follow. Okay? Makes sense? Good. Anyways, where are we up to? Rabbi Yosef. Okay. So basically we threw out Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef got thrown out from a brisa. Right? Now we say, Ulamai de salakadaitame koro. And this, that it came up in our mind to begin with. The Sefer Bati. That is Sefer and Bati are equal. The Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman says, Allah Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya. And Rav Nachman says the halach is like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, who prohibits whatever base Hillel seemed to allow. Elo Shabbos rechitz b'cham leika. It seems to prove that there is no option to wash your hands in hot water on Shabbat, right? And in previous Gemara, we determined that we are allowed to wash our hands, feet, and face with warm water on Shabbat. Therefore, if we're allowed to do it, there has to be a possibility to do it, and the only possible way of doing it is to have boiling hot water from Friday into Shabbat, and then take this boiling hot water and mix it into cold water. Now, if you're going to tell me that there's no possible way to mix hot and cold water on Shabbat to make warm water comfortable for washing your hands, you're basically telling me that that rule doesn't exist. But we already determined that the rule actually does exist. And since the rule actually does exist, proves that there's a fault in this very logic. Now, to tell me that Rabbi Yosef didn't hear a brisa, fine. But to tell me that Rabbi Yosef has a flawed logic, we're not going to accept that. Because Rabbi Yosef was a brilliant sage. And therefore, he definitely did not make a simple logical mistake. Impossible. Didn't happen. All right? So now the Gemara is going to figure out how do we justify this seeming logic mistake by Rav Yosef. And that's where we got up till yesterday, right? Now we're going to continue. Kenai Nahara. Where are we? Mi savarta Rabbi Shimon aseifa koi. Areisha koi. Do you think that Rabbi Shimon is referring to the seifa, which is the end, the latter? He's referring to the beginning, the earlier part. Right? What does this mean? So whenever we say the latter and the earlier is, we have to look at the statement that's being analyzed. Okay, and the statement that's being analyzed very often has an earlier part and a latter part. Okay, a beginning and an end. Reisha literally comes from the word head. Reish is head. But in Judaism, very often the word head is also the beginning, right? Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year, right? But it really means the head of the year. So the head, and by the way, Rishon, which means the first, actually comes from the word head. Okay, so when say Reisha is the beginning or the head, and Seifa is the end. It doesn't literally mean the beginning and the end of the entire statement. It could also mean the beginning and the end of a particular part of that statement, which means it can be an earlier and a latter part of that statement. Now, The earlier part of the statement is as follows. The early part of the statement says, what is the earlier part of the statement says? That Beis Hillel allows you to mix cold and hot water in a cup, no matter what. Only when you're trying to mix it in an ambati, only if you're trying to mix this in a bathtub, does he say you must pour the hot into the cold and not the cold into the hot. So we really have two statements. We have the statement of the ambati, right, that you must pour from hot into cold. And you have the statement of the cup where you could do however you want. When we originally assumed that Rabbi Shimon prohibits, we assumed that he was referring to the bathtub. When Beis Hillel says that you can pour hot into cold, but not cold into hot, we thought that it was referring to the bathtub, that Rabbi Shimon says, no, in a bathtub you can't do it at all. But that's not true, says the Gemara. The Gemara says, don't think that it's going on the latter part, it's going on the early part, which is the cup. In the cup, where Beis Hillel says you can pour whichever way you want, over there, Rabbi Shimon says, no, you're not allowed to pour whichever way you want. You must also pour hot into cold and not cold into hot. Right? Good? You make sense?
Then they introduced the Sefer.
Huh?
But they introduced the Sefer.
No, we originally thought that Rabbi Shimon was referring to the Sefer, which is the latter part, but really he was referring to the beginning part, the Reisha. Right? So it says, Mi savat Rabbi Shimon as-Sefer koi. Are you opinion? Do you think that Rabbi Shimon is referring to the latter part? Areisha koi is referring to the earlier part. Beis Hillel matirin bein cham l'teich tzeinin, bein teich chamim, and Beis Hillel allows you to put hot into cold or cold into hot. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh eiser tzein l'teich chamim. He says, no, you cannot put cold into hot. Impossible. You're not allowed to do that. Okay? So by switching it, now it makes sense. Okay, now it seems to make sense. Meaning Rav Yosef's attempt of trying to compare a seifel to an ambati makes sense if we're going to change Rabbi Shimon. We originally thought Rabbi Shimon was talking about the latter part. Really, he's talking about the earlier part. Now it seems to make sense. Maybe. It might make sense. We're not sure yet. Okay? We're going to see the Gemara is going to try to attempt to throw that out as well, as we very often do. I want to remind you guys, you can definitely leave a comment. If you leave a comment, if you do it during the live video, I might actually mention your name and share your comment, whether it's a comment, whether it's a question, whether it's a statement, something you want to know. Please feel free to ask in the comments. If I get it after the live class, I might have to actually answer you, not in the live class. You'll actually just get a text answer instead of a face-to-face answer. So you better grab your opportunity right now if you want to be part of this class live in Tzfat. We're in the holy city of Tzfat in Israel, in the northern of Israel, known as the capital of Kabbalah. Although for some reason we're learning Talmud in the capital of Kabbalah, we do that too, because in the Talmud there's a lot of Kabbalistic secrets as well. So we do that as well. Good? Excellent. Where are we up to? Okay, so we seem to have solved the issue. What is the issue? How do we solve the issue? We say, okay, the issue solved. It's going about the latter part. It's talking about the earlier part and not the latter part. There's only one problem with that, people. What's the problem?
They disagreed.
Who disagrees?
Rabbi Shimon and Beit Shammai.
Well, Rabbi Shimon and Beit Shammai?
Oh wait, no, Beit Hillel.
So what's wrong with Rabbi Shimon? Rabbi Shimon is a Tana. He can argue with Beis Hillel. What's the big deal about that? Right? Rabbis argued all the time. What's the problem? What's the real problem over here? Yeah, well, what's the problem with him just referring to the cup? What's the issue with that? Huh? What's that? You're saying, what about the bath? That's not an issue. The bath is the bath. It's a separate discussion. Perhaps he doesn't comment on it. What's the problem here? I want you guys to look in the Gemara and try to figure out the problem. Okay?
He says son l'toch hamim.
Huh?
He says oser son l'toch hamim.
Okay, so what's the problem with that?
Why doesn't he say it's the other way around too? Because he said, didn't he say they were?
No, he said he's saying that only cold into hot is a problem. Hot into cold is not a problem. Yeah. So what's the problem with that?
No, but before he said they're oser. But he said one word
Right, so you're saying we took the fact that he says he's prohibited and now we're defining how he prohibits it. What does he mean by the fact that he prohibited it?
But the Rashi said that he prohibits both, and now it's saying he only
Where does Rashi say he prohibited both? Earlier, the way we thought, you have to understand, earlier in the Talmud we thought he was prohibiting both. Now the Talmud is deciding, no, he didn't prohibit both. Right? No problem with that. What's the real problem? Let's hear. Anybody figured it out? Let's go. Who can figure out what's the real problem? Let's go. Who can figure out what's the real issue over here? Huh?
Oh, wait.
The real issue over here.
Beis Shammai, so it's redundant?
Huh?
If it was,
Oh, we have a brilliant Talmudic scholar over here. Did you read further or you figured it out yourself?
read a little further, but I didn't really know what they were talking about.
So you're saying you figured it out yourself?
Well, they talked
Good
about
for
Beis
you.
Shammai afterwards.
Huh?
Kind of read ahead.
Okay, so if you look at the new way we just defined Rabbi Shimon's opinion, he's holding exactly like Beis Shammai. And two rabbis don't have the same opinion, or if they did, put it this way, if the Mishnah is mentioning two separate rabbis, they didn't have two separate opinions. Okay, again, if the Mishnah is mentioning two separate rabbis by name, each rabbi has a different opinion. If they would have the same opinion, we would say that these two rabbis had the same opinion. We wouldn't say one opinion, then go to another opinion, and go to a third opinion. If we're listing different opinions, it proves that they're all different opinions. So the fact that the Gemara is trying to suggest that Rabbi Shimon is holding like Beis Shammai makes no sense. Now, if it makes no sense, it actually challenges the very possibility that that's actually what Rabbi Shimon meant. Again, remember, initially we thought Rabbi Shimon was talking about the latter part of the discussion. We said, no, he's talking about the earlier part of the discussion. But if he's talking about the earlier part of the discussion, then it's redundant, because Beis Shammai already said that, right? Therefore, it would suggest, no, it's not the earlier, it's actually the latter part, which means we're back to square one. We need to try to figure out how is there something unique about Rabbi Shimon's opinion, because if we cannot figure out something unique about Rabbi Shimon's opinion, we will have to answer it that it is contradicting the way of Rav Yosef, right? So, what's that?
I was thinking, couldn't another problem be, couldn't the earlier part of the statement be referring to the words of Beis Shammai? Couldn't he be ruling more stringently than Beis Shammai?
Who?
Whoever he's talking about.
Shimon.
Rav Shimon.
So you're suggesting that Rabbi Shimon perhaps is more strict than Beis Shammai,
Yeah.
that he doesn't allow even hot into cold.
Yeah, because that is the earliest part of the statement. so
Okay,
it's not
again,
Beis
it's a good
Shammai.
suggestion. It's a good suggestion. Let's see how let's see if the Gemara answers that. Yeah. Hachika Amar. Now here is very interesting. What we're going to say right now is this is what's going on over here. This is what it's saying. Loi nechlechu Beis Shammai u Beis Hillel b'davar zeh. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel did not even argue about these things. In other words, Rabbi Shimon is actually arguing with the very earlier statement that there is an argument. Okay? These are only Jews could come up with this concept, right? They argue whether there's an argument or not. That's essentially what's going on here. There's an argument whether there's an argument. Now, in order to understand what this actually means, right? And by the way, anybody watching, feel free to put out a comment. And if it's a question, you want to send a question, a comment, please send it and put it in the comments, and we will try to address it in the class. If you do it live, we'll try to address it in the class. Very, very important. Put it in. I might even mention your name if, it's exciting, to see all the way from the holy city of Tzfat, you get your name mentioned. All you have to do is put in a good question. Okay? Okay, so some David Colin Oliver, do you know who this guy is? Who's this guy? Huh? You don't know who he is? Some Chacham. He writes that Hillel and Shammai are like yin and yang. Anyways, I don't know, yin and yang. But they did argue a lot. But so let me explain to you that the Mishnah, which is in the Tanaic era, is a compilation of teachings that happened throughout a few hundred years. Okay? Now, that being said, Very often, it was not 100% clear, or there was an argument whether these statements were actually said or they weren't actually said. Right? So take, for example, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. They were some of the earlier Tanaic sages. The people recording the Mishnah very often were recording these statements 200-300 years later. And therefore, there can be an argument whether or not they even had this discussion. And this actually is very common in the Mishnah and in the Gemara. Very often there's an argument whether there's an argument or not. And here Rabbi Shimon is basically saying that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel never had this discussion. They never had such a discussion. Never happened. Okay, can you imagine that the Mishnah here is actually a very important lesson that we learn in the Talmud. People always ask me, how do you take practical life lessons from the Talmud? Here is a practical life lesson in the Talmud, right? You read a newspaper, you read the media, and very often you assume that whatever they said is fact, right? That's the fact. Now somebody could come to you and maybe explain to you the facts in a different format, right? But very often, once you hear it as a fact, in your mind it's stuck as a fact. Same thing, when you read this quote, you're reading it, okay, here's the fact. Beis Shammai says this, Beis Shammai says this. You're missing another important fact. Beis Shammai didn't say this, and Beis Hillel didn't say that. Somebody said that Beis Shammai said this, and Beis Hillel said this, right? And that somebody might be wrong, right? The same thing today when you see media, mass media or not mass media, whatever you're going to see, right? Very often, they are wrong. Right? Very often they say what they call in America today fake news, right? They say fake news. You ever heard of they? They say a lot of things, right? And you know what? They're wrong sometimes too.
Most of the time they're the exact opposite of what ends up being true. It's not just that they're wrong, it's that they're perfectly anti-true from the very beginning. In many ways.
What's that? Somebody said we have a good comment from... What's this guy's name? Darth Beer Jew?
Darth Bear Jew.
666. Uh-oh. We're messing with that. He says, this Talmudic ritual doesn't seem that scary. Why don't you come here and try it in live and then see how scary it is? Was that you that put that up? No, it wasn't you? You have no idea who it is? All right. But thanks for the comment. It's very interesting that you think it's not that scary. Truth is, it's not. Talmud is actually extremely intellectually stimulating. It's not meant to be scary. It's meant to be informative and enhancing and enlightening, etc. Anyways, what were we saying? So as I said, when you see something and when you hear a piece of information, okay, when somebody says, for example, we hear this a lot in Chabad, they say, the Rebbe said... Yeah? The Rebbe said... You have to realize the Rebbe didn't say. You say that the Rebbe said, okay? And you have to look at it in that way. Whenever you hear a piece of information, you have to understand that this isn't a real piece of information. Somebody is saying this piece of information. And it's very important to know who that somebody is, okay? In this case, we have a quote from a brisa. It's a brisa, which means there is a quote. We know that somebody said, Beis Shammai said this, and Beis Hillel said this. Our Gemara now determines that Rabbi Shimon argues and says, no, they didn't argue in this. Right? And seemingly, Rabbi Shimon's opinion is saying that everybody holds you're always allowed to pour hot into cold, but you're never allowed to pour cold into hot. Okay, so again, they're arguing whether, in fact, there's an argument or not. Good. Let's continue. By the way, please share, like, subscribe, whatever you want to do, do it. Help this class get out there. And again, you can ask questions, put your comments in the comments, and we will try to answer it live if you actually put in those comments when we're still in the live class. If you do it after the live class, you might actually have to suffice with a text reply in a comment. All right? Good. Okay. I think really that's, let me just see how the time is going. Yeah. The truth is, it's Monday. Tuesday we can learn the next piece. So I think we should stop here, okay? Because essentially the next piece is a little bit of a conclusion, but it's not a continuation of the discussion. It's kind of its own little thing, okay? So just to recap today, we spoke yesterday. We had a quote from the Tanaic quote. In the Tanaic quote, we had three opinions. We had Beis Shammai, we had Beis Hillel, and then we had who else? Rabbi Shimon. Okay, now, one thing we know for sure, the second we have these three opinions, we know for sure that there are actually three separate opinions. Okay? Now that we know there's three separate opinions, we tried to analyze what these opinions are. Okay, Rabbi Yosef he wanted to say that maybe a seifel and an ambati are the same thing. It seems to be that we determined that they're not the same thing. But the very fact that he thought that they might be the same thing came to teach us a very important lesson, which is clarifying that Rabbi Shimon is not arguing on Beis Shammai, he's not arguing on Beis Hillel, but who is he arguing on? The anonymous author of that quote. Okay? Now again, when you're reading the Gemara, you're like, oh, it seems like the Gemara is telling me that this is what Beis Shammai says. But again, who's telling you? The Gemara is telling you. How did the Gemara get that information? The Gemara got that information because somebody quoted them as follows. And then, of course, Rabbi Shimon says, I'm sorry to tell you, but this quote is inaccurate to begin with, and that's that. Makes sense?
What's the source?
Yes. So again, you see that there's you very often you took something as a fact, and then you realize that it's not necessarily a fact. And that's pretty much what the lesson for today is. And I want to remind you that we're about to end the class, but now that we're at the end of the class, we're open to questions. So if you have any question, by the way, you can ask any question on Judaism, anyone in the class or anybody online could ask any question about Judaism at the end of the class, or it could be about the class that we actually gave, or it could be about anything else, and we'll give you a few seconds to type in your comments. If you type in a comment, then we'll try to address it. If they don't do from YouTube, does it also go onto this thing? Yes. Even if however you comment, it will come into my feed here, and we'll see the question. You have approximately 20 seconds before we close this. Unless somebody has a question, then it gets extended. Does anybody here have a question that they wanted to ask? Huh? What? Anyone? Any questions?
What is lema?
Lema? Lema, I have it as a keyword there, right? Lema literally means say, but it's kind of like suggest. Let's suggest this, right? Meaning, let's suggest that this is reality. Say. I would even say in English, we say let's say, right? We say, let's say that this is reality, right? Anyone else? Questions, comments? Again, it could be from online, it could be from in the class. Last chance. Yes? What? This Talmudic ritual doesn't seem that scary. I like that. I'm not sure if he's still here, Mr. Whatever it is. Huh? Thanks, Rabbi, coming from Colin O. I wonder who that is.
From YouTube.
Huh?
So you can see the different colors on these things,
Yeah.
where you can tell where they're coming from. All right, bye everybody.
All right. Bye-bye. Have a great